the end of last year, we had roughly 67,000 native speakers of other languages, Finnish or Swedish, and about 23% at the moment of all the residents of the city are non-native Finnish and Swedish speakers, and this goes up by roughly 1 percentage point per year. So that's the sort of speed we're looking at if we're looking at the demographic change of Espoo. And about this topic of demographics, I found it very interesting this spring around the time of the general elections, when the Grand Old Man of Statistics Finland, Pekka Myrskylä, gave an interview to Yle about employment, about immigration, about the population structure change we're seeing in this country. And first, I would like to go back to his interview last spring. He pointed out that after the year 2000 in Finland, the number of employed people among the native population has gone down by 15,000 people. So over the last 20 years and a bit more, 15,000 less native Finns are working. And during that same period of time, 149,000 non-native Finnish and Swedish speakers. I mean, the employment of non-native Finnish and Swedish speakers has gone up by 149,000. So we've seen quite a lot of sort of employment percentage rise in Finland during the last few governmental periods. It's essential for this country. We sort of desperately need to see that happening, and 100% of all that growth has come from the work done in this country by immigrants. And this is bringing me to the first point that I would like to make about the new government program. I feel that somehow this demographic reality and the actual change that is taking place in our labor market has not been taken into account by the people who have written this document. And one of the most important targets or aims of the national government program is to have 100,000 people more employed. And again, we desperately need that. I strongly agree with that target. I mean, today we heard that probably also next year will loan roughly 10 billion euros of money from elsewhere, since we have a massive budget deficit in this country. So we need to sort of get productivity up, and we need to have more people, more hours put in at workplaces to sort of boost the economic viability of this country. And since like 100% or a bit more even of the growth of in employment has come from the work that immigrants have done in Finland, I find it very confusing that the same government that is aiming to have 100,000 more people employed would like to restrict in many ways or discourage the number of people coming in across the borders to this country, and also in my perspective seems to offer very limited means of making sure that people who have already arrived from elsewhere would get employed in Finland. This is why I wanted to borrow your slide, because there's quite a lot of stuff about permanent residence, the permits, the residence permit policy. There's new sort of more strict rules on gaining citizenship in Finland. All messages basically underlining that we don't really necessarily want anyone to arrive in this country, or we want to see less people arriving, or we want to make sure that, or sort of give out the message that people who arrive in this country are not necessarily to stay here for good. Mm. And all of these messages are very poorly linking to the idea of having employment numbers up by 100,000 people. All the past victories we've had over the last 2 decades are purely based on the work done by immigrants in Finland. So I'm finding it confusing. Which one do we want to have? Do we want to have more employment and sort of accept the fact that with our population structure and aging native population, it's not going to be done by native Finns, at least not in large extent, or do we want to restrict the number of people coming in, discourage people from coming in, give out the message that they're not necessarily welcome to stay here for good, to build our society together with us? Which one do we want to have? And if this the basic idea is in conflict, in internal conflict, it's very difficult for me as a municipal bureaucrat to sort of understand what we're doing here. What's the aim? What's the target? Right. So that's my first point. And then the second point would be about the integration policy. Now that I've read the government policy program again this week, I feel that there's a very strong sort of, let's say, meta-level idea or approach or attitude that the sort of biggest problem we have in integration policy is the lack of willingness and motivation of people arriving in this country to integrate into our society and to the labor market as well. So it seems that the government feels that people are not sort of motivated or willing to do the right stuff you need to do to sort of become an active member in our society. And based on the experience I've had in integration policy and immigration affairs in general, I really can't agree with this notion. I see it differently, and as a concrete sort of example, I would like to say that over the last couple of years, we've developed new sort of employment services in Espoo for immigrants, and at least part of these services have been in my count pretty successful. We've been able to help people to get employed. Also, we've been able to help quite a lot of highly educated people to find employment that matches their qualifications. So not just any job, but the sort of job where you can sort of benefit from the efforts you put in at a university in Finland or elsewhere. And during this time, the sort of legal setting, the sanctions, the incentives, all the economic stuff hasn't really changed. It's the same. Now they're planning changes to the social security, to the income transfer levels, as Erno just pointed out. I'm not sure if that's a sort of beneficial way to go forward. I feel that often we've been providing perhaps not very customer-oriented services or not very beneficial services. I believe that now that where I feel that we've been on a path of developing services that actually benefit people, help people in concrete terms, and without any sort of new sanctions or financial incentives, we've had pretty good results. So I feel that there's quite a lot of room for improvement in the service side of things. The government policy program says very, very little about the service side of things. And it says quite a lot of stuff about the motivation side. And I one of the reasons why I think this is a shame is that it tends to have this, let's say, suspicious attitude towards immigrants. Perhaps they're not really willing to put in the effort and learn the language and join the labor market and do their best. And one of the reasons why I find it sort of, let's say, counterproductive is that we know from research quite well that there's quite a lot of things like recruitment discrimination in this country. And partially, I suppose, it's due to native Finns having suspicion or suspicious minds when it comes to immigrants and their motivation and their background and so on. It's some sort of form of xenophobia, perhaps. And this suspicious attitude that, in my eyes, seems to run through the government policy program is sort of echoing that thinking that I feel has been harmful in many ways, both for the people who have arrived in Finland and elsewhere, and also to Finland as a country and us as a nation. So that's my second point about the policy program. Hopefully it made sense also without slides, and let's have a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move on, but you have one last chance to take a look at the press memo to add. And there are many interesting questions and comments there already. So we will actually put that on the screen now in a moment. So I'd like to invite all of our wonderful speakers to join us here. So Riina, Erna, Julia, Teemu, and Nick, if you don't mind finding a spot that you feel comfortable to sit in. And of course, Johanna and Dietmar, who are helping me moderate this, please join us anywhere you like. There's 2 more spots, and I'll just be roving. And I'm going to pass around a couple of mics here. So this one should be on. Maybe Johanna can start with that. And we'll pass these as well. Down. I'll give this to somebody in the center. But maybe I can just start by, because we've now heard from Erna and Teemu quite a bit about their interests, their backgrounds, and their kind of perspectives. I'd like to start with Riina and Julia, and then to Nick, just to say, well, tell us something about yourself. What brings you to this set of issues? Maybe something from your background, something that you've worked on, and what concerns you now in this moment. So I'll start with Riina, because you're a good friend and colleague, and I know a little bit about your journey, but maybe you can share that with the audience.
Thanks a lot, and thank you very much for the invitation. And it's good to see a big crowd here in Friday evening. So my name is Riina Bhatia, and I'm a deputy city councillor at the Helsinki City Council. And a little bit about my background. I was very honored to be invited to this panel. And I was asking Nitin that, so you're asking me to come here because of my background. So what do you think? Why am I coming here? And we started talking about, what could I bring to this panel? So I'm obviously a daughter of a migrant. My father comes from India, but I was born and raised here. That's, first of all, the kind of maybe starting point, also seeing the side of things from sort of a Finnish person, but then also sort of a migrant, and always being in this kind of weird influx in this very homogeneous country. Then I started in 2015. I started to be interested in asylum things, and I did my master's degree in peace and conflict research, where I studied the asylum process and the restrictions in the legal aid, and and looked at from a political economy perspective and tried to understand why is this happening? Why are we actually doing this? And I started to create kind of like a bigger, longer time perspective that, you know, together with the rise of neoliberalism, why is migration also being restricted? And I started to kind of understand, yeah, it relates to our economic system, more or less. And the way in which we rationalize everything through economic arguments. And this is why I refuse to say that, yeah, good, we have migrants, so we have more economic growth. Though it's probably good. Since then, I have worked for the EU Commission in New Delhi with Schengen migration. I worked for European Migration Network as a researcher, and I was working as a practitioner at the Employment and Economic Affairs Office as a youth migrant integration officer. Since then, I've moved on to different things, and currently I'm a PhD researcher at Helsinki University on both growth and sustainability transitions. But at my workplace and BTT, which is a technical research center of Finland, inclusivity and gender are big issues, and we've studied gender and inclusivity in kind of technology fields, and come to the conclusion that, it's a huge topic, and migration is obviously very important there as well. But we've seen that our institutions aren't necessarily as inclusive as we would hope to, and this relates to innovation and growth as well. Because if we have a very, very, very narrow mindset in our innovation policy and innovation settings as well, are we actually being very creative in the end? So that's a little bit about my background. And as we were talking with Nitin, I realized that, yeah, actually migration relates to my life more than through my father as well. So yeah, I'm not as knowledgeable in migration issues these days because I don't follow it as a researcher. And here I'm more in the capacity of a policymaker, of an activist, of a daughter of a migrant than as a researcher. So yeah, very nice to meet you all.
Could you pass it on? Or I guess you already have a mic, so.
Thank you for the invitation. It's really nice to be here and discuss these important topics. I'm also a daughter of a migrant. My mom moved to Finland with her family 1 year before the Soviets fell. So she was Estonian and then got her Finnish residence and so forth. But obviously I don't necessarily look that part, and my name doesn't get that out there either. So that's why I also feel like it's important for me to discuss these topics, because I don't necessarily get those like biases that other people might get from these questions. I'm the president of the Swedish Youth of Finland, and I've been quite vocal about this part of the government program, discussing also with like everyone in my mother party, and the problems that I see, not only with the specific things in the program, in this part especially, but also like the whole way that is written. Like you all brought it up already, that the style that is written kind of brings up the underlying attitudes that especially a certain party in the government has, but also is kind of accepted then by the other ones in a way. So I feel like it's important to raise awareness of what these things actually concretely would do to Finland if they're seen through. The government policy is like important to know that it's not law. It's something that can change, even though it's something that obviously guides the politics that the government wants to do. It brings out the ideas that they have in the negotiations, but it's not law yet. And in the immigration part, the one thing that I, even though if I criticize my own mother party also to some extent, the one thing that I did think that they did right was to get the terms changed to like that we're going to look into something, we're going to explore if that's going to happen and stuff like that. And that obviously means that it's going to be something that they look into, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen. It obviously depends then on the parties together and the government as a whole, that what they do with that information that they will get from those things. But as I said, it's an important topic, and I'm going to continue talking about it and end up in in my party, and I am happy that they've all taken like serious stance also in this, but obviously it's disappointing to have that part in the program anyways from the start.
Thank you, Julia. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Julia. And it's important that you brought this up, because I think one of the questions that was posted online was actually, when will this program take effect? But as Julia just explained, it's still in the preparatory stages, so there's still time, hopefully, to have an impact on this. And also some of the proposals are such that they might not actually be passed for various reasons.
So maybe we take Nick giving an introduction, and then we can open it up to full panel.
Yeah, thanks for including me on the panel meeting, and Johanna. So my grandparents were Jewish refugees from Vienna. They were Austrian and Czechoslovakian, and they came in early 1939 to the UK as refugees, in my opinion, but they were also called economic migrants because there was no such means by which to become a refugee at that time, and they were treated as suspiciously as aliens, is the word that was used. I've always had this kind of strong sense of justice because of being educated about those kind of issues from a very early age. But I became political only when I moved to Sweden at the age of about 22 or something like that, 23, when I saw the decline of my own country and how much fairer a society could be. That Sweden's not perfect, Finland's not perfect, but we have much more equitable societies than the UK, and the UK has slid a lot further since then. So I became interested in politics, but I've been trying for about 6 or 7 of the 9 years that I've been in Finland to become involved in politics. And no party, not even really my own party, which is the Left Alliance, had a very clear space for immigrants. So a couple of years ago, during the municipal election campaign, together with our co-founder Melissa, we started discussing about whether we should create this kind of space in the party in Left Alliance for immigrants. And originally we decided not to because it's a lot of work, and it also, we were a bit worried it might keep immigrants a bit segregated within the party. But after 2 more years, when the election results came out, we realized that nothing still happened and no other parties providing this kind of space either. And so we just have to make it happen. So what we've done is, over the last couple of months, we've founded a registered association, and in about 2 to 3 weeks, it should become a chapter of the Left Alliance. And it's an immigrant-led grassroots chapter, very active chapter, and our aim is to help to both represent and also integrate immigrants into Finnish politics much better. So that's why I'm here today speaking about these issues. I don't have a background in immigration issues. I would actually like to be able to influence Finnish policy, not only about immigration issues, but thanks to the government program, this is the most pressing matter for immigrants at the moment. So just trying to do what we can to help represent them better. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Nick. And yeah, thanks once more for all the panelists for being here. We're going to now start the panel discussion. We have prepared some questions for the panelists, but we will reserve time for discussion with the audience as well. So the first question that I would like to propose is, and Erna and Teemu you have already kind of talked about this, but we will let the others also have a chance to comment on this. So the question is, what changes proposed in the new program do you feel most concerned about, and why?
I think the people that haven't spoken about, so you see if it's possible.
Yeah. So maybe I can go first. I was trying to take some notes of the things that I wanted to say, so this doesn't become a very random ramble. But I think in general, I think Erna And then you gave a very great picture of the kind of overall, where is this going? And it's going to restrict the rights of migrants. And again, coming from my background and from kind of the lens and the angle in which I see the world is through the economy and the political economy of things. And what I'm mostly concerned is not necessarily any one piece of legislation or proposal, but the compilation of them and what they try to accomplish. And I'm worried that, and this is not my own idea, actually, I was listening to a podcast when Antti Tarvainen was speaking about innovations again. And he was talking about Volt and Foodora and these type of companies that employ a lot of migrants. And he was saying that actually the innovation that has been established isn't necessarily a technological one. The innovation that Volt, for example, created is the way in which they can bypass labor regulations. And my worry is that these policies combined will create a vulnerable mass of workers who has the only way in which they can stay in this country is by working under whatever conditions. And if you look at the labor regulations that this government is proposing, this is exactly the way in which we are going. So we are creating a labor market, but on 2 different levels or even more levels than 2, which is very unfortunate. And this is one of my biggest worries. And this kind of would also explain why this has been accepted by the 3 other parties that are in the government. It might be good for the business, but might necessarily not be good for the workers. And I know this is a very critical stance, but this is something that does worry me. But it's also, you know, if we are following this neoliberal narrative, if we are following this neoliberal understanding of citizenship, it does start to make sense that, you know, we're just creating a vulnerability to people so that maybe unintentionally or intentionally exploitation becomes much more easier. I know this is very critical, but that's my worry.
I'd also like to back up what Riina just said. Finns are generally very hesitant to talk about party politics or broader political concepts. I understand that. I come from a country with a very combative parliament, and Finnish parliament, instead of 2 sides facing one another, they're all facing the centre. And that's an important thing behind the culture of politics. But we are dealing with parties and politics, and all of the parties in this government are economically on the right. They have vastly different social policies, but they're all looking to, at least to different extents, weaken labour laws. And before we even come to immigration policies, the government programme is a severe attack on workers and trade unions. And that will be the first issue that comes up in the parliamentary session, is attack workers' rights and then attack immigrants, because immigrants are already vulnerable workers. And once those workers' rights have been attacked even further, then immigrants will be even more vulnerable. So I'm worried about the combination of the policies. And also there's a lot of contradictory policies there, for example, between integration and other issues, as Teemu said.
Well, I understand your point of view in that. I would kind of want to disagree that is like the main idea of that. I think that part just shows the willingness of the coalition party to do a lot not to be in the same government with the Social Democrats, because this is the one part that in the way that you get the true Finns into the government. They wanted something to show out, and this is the only policy part that they actually have as a party. They don't really have much politics outside of immigration, so that's the piece that they kind of want to show off if you don't talk about gas prices and stuff like that. But I do agree that those policies would lead to like labor market that you are talking about, but I don't see that as like the ground thing, because I'm in a party that's economically right, and I do think that the government program has some things that are good also to the labor market. I don't agree on everything that's there. But I do think that the underlying reason why we do have this horrible like immigration part is mainly due to the coalition party wanting this type of government.
Thank you. I would like to go on with the next question, even though we quite a lot answered already in the first answer. Why do you feel these changes are being proposed by the new coalition parties and why now? And if we understand the reasoning, perhaps it's a way to counter them. What do we think the ways that we can try to counter these policies?
Well, I think what part of the content that is, I mean, Erkka mentioned there's quite a lot of stuff, quite a lot of pages in the government program about these issues that we're talking about here. I think in some cases, in some issues, the new government will face sort of parliamentary checks and balances, especially in the constitutional committee of the parliament, especially regarding income transfers and differentiating the politics sort of between native Finns and non-native Finns. I think part of the content of the national policy program will be impossible in real terms to implement, so that it would be constitutional. But we'll see in the next few years if I'm right or not. But that's my guess.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to this government program that we've been talking about, another quite interesting paper is the migration program by the Finnish party, which they published before the elections. And if you read that, it's quite similar to this migration policy of the government. There are a lot of the things that are here are from that paper. I mean, they were in that paper as well. Probably they are jumped from there. It's not quite as bad as what they actually proposed. For example, that we are still taking 500 quota refugees instead of 0, which was the Finnish party's suggestion. But yeah, I think it does look quite clear that that's where they are coming from, these points, a lot of them.
Yeah, and if I might add, I think 500 is the minimum allowed by the EU law.
Yeah.
So it was not a choice, it was kind of a complicated number.
But basically, like what Julia said, that about getting this kind of coalition probably meant that this is what they had to do.
Would you like to add something, Nick?
Yes, I would. So in the UK, the Conservative Party for 13 years has been calling what it itself terms a hostile environment for immigrants, particularly targeting refugees. So they have purposefully engineered their policies in such a way that it makes people feel unsafe, or that the UK is an unattractive country to come to, or that just generally intimidated. I think that Finland needs to pay a lot more attention to political tactics from other countries, because they're being copied here and people don't really want to be too aware of those kind of nasty tactics, but they are happening here. So as I said earlier in my speech, even if these policies don't pass, and I think as Deva was alluding to, because many of them may be unconstitutional even, it doesn't really matter, because the parties of government, and particularly one party that we all know which party that is, have achieved their aim to divide people and create tensions between different groups, as well as creating kind of ethnic tensions. There's also the aim to divide immigrants into different categories. So our chapter of Helsinki Left would like to emphasize that we should have solidarity between different groups of immigrants and also between Finns and immigrants.
Yeah, thanks. No, maybe you were asking why is this happening? So and what is the kind of root cause behind this? So I would say I think Erna, you mentioned in your presentation that many of these policies will actually not lead to any savings, rather they will lead to costs. So I think it's quite clear that it's an ideological basis that we have for these policies. And the ideology strife comes from the true Finns. And with that, the second reason is the tit for tat politics is that, like you mentioned, that the coalition party needed the true Finns in the government in order to get their very extremely ambitious economic policies in place. And this is the party that will allow these to kind of, or support in the implementation of these economic policies. And then one thing you mentioned, or you both mentioned about the constitutional processes and that some of these legislations might be unconstitutional. But then if you look at who are the leaders of the constitutional committee in this parliament, I might be paying a little bit of attention into the interpretation of the constitution in the next coming parliamentary term, because they are helped by the True Finns and the coalition party as well.
If I just may add one more point, if I understood your question correctly, you were asking about sort of counterweight to some of the measures being proposed.
Yes, and I think it's really important in the moment that, as was mentioned, that the Constitution Committee is being held or led by Kokoomus National Coalition and Perussuomalaiset Basic Finns with Junila that being the vice chair, that he just resigned from the ministry because of his ties and everything.
So if I may add one more little point about this whole idea of having like counterweight or different kind of thinking. I think in many European countries over the years we've seen the national government and then the sort of capital metropolitan region being slightly on different tracks when it comes to immigration and integration policies. And since this national government program, in my eyes, seems to lack like credible content, credible, viable ideas on successful integration policy, I feel that the cities of the capital region in Finland, we don't necessarily have a choice of, leaving the important things undone. I mean, we're facing the sort of population structure change that is sort of pushing the cities to do things to support integration of people arriving from elsewhere, and also integration of children being born in immigrant families in the capital region. I mean, last year, a year ago, 30% of the first grade kids in Espoo have an immigrant background, and we don't really have a choice of not doing our very best to make sure that these children would have equal opportunities through the Finnish education system to sort of fulfill their potential later on in life. And hopefully the national government will be willing to sort of support us through legislation and funding and through the different tools that they have at their disposal. But if they're not doing that, I'm not sure if the cities can afford not to do the things that are being needed to do, but that we need to get done in order to help or support integration. So it could be that instead of the national integration policy, we could be possibly seeing sort of local integration policies.
So I was thinking that we could maybe take a few questions that are quite a many here, and I'd love for you guys to just vote on them But we already have one that I'd love to start with from Johanna, she's here from Vasa. Thank you, Johanna. And you know what? Why don't you ask the question, because like.
Thank you. Politics is not charity. Parties actually listen to people to vote or who vote. And I'm wondering that how could we increase the share of immigrants who vote in municipal elections and national elections? And do you know, you yourself, whether you can vote? Have you found out? Have you made a plan? Because in a way, things are not free in this world. And in Finland, the way of speaking, we are nice, we are conciliatory, but parties listen to people who vote. That's just a fact. And I think this is something that needs to be more addressed in the immigrant communities.
We'll give this to the panel, maybe somebody wants to answer.
May I? So this is a big problem that not enough immigrants are voting. At least most immigrants can vote in the municipal elections, and when they're a citizen, they can vote in national and other elections. We plan to disseminate this information and make people more aware of this through our activities, and not only to serve ourselves, but we also think that it's important that everyone engages in democracy, whether it serves our party or not. So we want to just generally raise awareness.
Well, I think this question is something that should be addressed to the audience in terms of, what you think, how to reach the message. I was running for the parliamentary elections in the spring, and we did some campaigning in the eastern parts of Helsinki. And we printed out leaflets in multiple languages, and I was there with my father to give chai to people, and many were not aware that there were elections, and many people told me that they will vote for Sanna Marin, and I told her, you can't vote for her. And they're like, yeah, I'll vote for her. I'm like, you don't live in Tampere, you live in Helsinki, she's a candidate there. And then they told me they will vote for Halla-aho, which was quite surprising as well. And it's like, okay, well, it's a free country. But this is it, that I think parties need to also be on the ground in places. My other colleagues were at the other side of Itis. They were in Itis. I went to Puhos, and I was the only candidate there. And I think there you could find out more voters and talk to them. And I thought it wasn't just for my own campaign, it was actually letting them know that there is an election coming. And I think in this sense, what you were mentioning about the two-way integration, I think we as citizens, as people, as human beings, we need to take more agency in this integration thing. We just can't let the bureaucracies and the institutions and the state take care of this. I genuinely believe that there should be more engagement. How to do that, I don't know. I'm not a researcher in deliberate democracy or democratic capacity building, but I think we should be more active in talking to each other.
And also making maybe like events like this where people feel more welcome and feel that they don't have to necessarily know anything about the party or the election or what's happening. They can just show up and talk to people. I feel like politics many times is for those in academia, those who have grown into politics, who have politically active parents. And that, I mean, that reflects on the election results also in a certain way. It's everyone is able to vote, but not everyone realizes that they can vote or that they feel like it's a good way to affect the politics that we have in this country. So I feel like there's a lot to be done. We need people to tell us what they wish for us to do. We also need to make constant effort to reach those people. We need to be in places where we wouldn't necessarily think automatically to be at, to reach those people who we can't reach in other ways. And like think of different like grassroots strategies, how to come to different like locations and stuff.
And I would just like to add, this is not now researcher, this is just a citizen talking. Because I'm not a politician, I'm not going to arrange things like that. What I do is I talk to my friends. hey, you got citizenship, great, did you know about elections? And yeah, this is how you can find out who you can vote for. So I mean, if like this is something I would say, first of all, if you don't know if you can vote, find out, and then talk to your friends. Because I do think that it's also much more effective when it's really great because not like that people, political people go on the streets, that's so important. But I do think it's probably more effective when it comes from a friend.
So in the democratic culture of our event, we're going to keep trying to see who's voting for the questions here. So please be active and vote for the questions you actually want answered. The highest voted one was this one. Somebody who asked this question would like to take the mic, or shall we just repeat the question here? No? Okay, so the question is, discrimination at work, especially in job interviews, has been increasingly alarming in recent past. Many highly educated immigrants are jobless, while only Finnish-sounding names are getting jobs. What's the solution for this problem? So, what's the magical solution?
Well, I can tell you two examples of the things that we've been trying to do about this. We a bit more than 2 years ago, we started this competence center for highly educated immigrants, which is aiming to help people to find employment that matches their qualifications. Previously, this work has been done very little in Finland. Perhaps we've had some European Social Fund funded projects for 27 customers or something like that, very sort of low volume services. And now we're aiming to provide these services for 450 people annually in Espoo. At the moment, we're at the pace of roughly above 400 people. I mean, the last 12 months, we've had more than 400 new customers. In the service process of maximum 10 months, at the end of the day, currently 55% of people are getting jobs that match their qualifications. I'm quite proud of that result, but obviously I have a strong bias here. But you can ask a neutral opinion from Hannu Tarvishi if you like. He's done some research on the topic at Aalto University. Another point is that we've had these talent match recruitment and matchmaking events online and also in physical surroundings quite a lot. We've had, I don't know, for the last 2 years, perhaps 3,000 or 4,000 participants looking for new career opportunities and hundreds of employers. And then these two actors meeting on the same platform. And one of the things that we're trying to do there is to sort of switch the order of the recruitment process a bit because of this discrimination that is linked to the background of people and possibly also even their name. If it sounds foreign, if it sounds strange, then the CV will go to the bottom of the pile. So instead of looking at the CVs and applications, we try to first sort of foster or provide encounters between the job seekers and the employers, and to have a discussion, a short discussion, to see if there's interest to continue conversations that might lead to employment later on down the line when they're actually also looking at the CV and possibly a formal application. So we've been trying to sort of reverse this order of the recruitment process to tackle this issue.
Yeah, I think that was a very analytical answer, and I don't think I will have as much to say, but probably it also depends on the kind of level of the job, whether it's high skilled, low skilled. I don't like to use these terms, but I do. But one issue might be also to implement anonymous recruitment. This has also been suggested by a lot of feminist researchers studying the gender disparities and inequalities in especially in certain sectors. And it has been proposed to be made into a law, and some cities, for example, Helsinki, is already following that. So I think that might be one way forward.
You also take another question, maybe if you want to answer.
Yeah, I really appreciate your practical answers. I'm sorry, I'm not going to give a very practical answer, but I'm just going to say that the way we understand integration in Finland is that migrants need to integrate and Finns need to do absolutely nothing. And the problem with that is that quite a lot of the employers are Finns. So we are complaining about unemployed immigrants but we don't hire them. And this is something that needs to change. That attitude needs to change. The native Finnish people need to understand that they are part of the integration process. If we want migrants to integrate, we need to be part of that, welcoming people, making sure that they have find their place here, because the native Finns are the majority in this country. So the minority can't make it without the majority.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'd just like to build on that point a bit, because I think we absolutely need to have these concrete recruitment processes that address those kind of issues. But we also probably have to accept that some of this change will not happen quickly because it's about attitudes towards immigrants. And the only way to achieve change in that area is gradually by healing divisions and making people understand one another a lot better. And there was a couple of weeks ago in Yle a study that showed that the highest voter share for the anti-immigration parties is in the areas with the lowest number of immigrants and vice versa. And you can see the same kind of things in the Brexit results, because the Brexit referendum was largely to do with anti-immigration sentiment as well. So if we want to change this, we also need to change people's attitude towards immigrants, but this is going to only happen quite gradually.
Thank you, everyone. And yes, I remember the question, so anyway, we can go on with that. The most voted question was, what is called a good integration, and how, who is well integrated and who is not? What is the definition of good integration? And I guess I can add that, how can we achieve that? Everyone would like to ask a question.
Well, I can go first. Well, I feel like that depends really much on the person. I feel like you're integrated when you feel like you feel at home in a country, you feel like you have a community that can support you. You feel like you're welcome and you feel like you're going to get help if you want to. That means, as was stated before, that also the native, in Finland, the Finns need to work on their own attitudes. They need to work on being able to provide actually help and not driving people away. They need to we need to build a place where people can get a community, because I mean, humans are social. Even though you're an introvert, you need still people around you that can help you if things get tough, and that community sense also is something that keeps you in a place, because if you don't feel like you have that community, you're going to go to another place. Then at the same time, obviously, when you move somewhere, you also have to figure out how that country works and adapt to it in one sense. That doesn't mean that you have to lose your own identity. You obviously have to keep yourself and have to keep yourself true to your heart and to the background you have. That's really important to everyone as a person. But you also kind of have to accept the fact that different things work differently in different countries, and need to find a way to manage that. But there also the community from that country comes into play, because they can then help you also figure that out.
Yeah, I think good integration is somehow linked to curiosity and mutual respect. But unfortunately, in this country, I feel, and this is my very subjective experience, but I feel like my father became a good migrant when he built a wooden house and started picking blueberries and mushrooms in the forest, and speaks perfect Turku dialect, by the way. And to the extent which, and this is a funny anecdote that I want to tell you, that he used to work in a school as a janitor. And one of the teachers, they've collected money from the students to take to a bank for a field trip, for a school trip. And he's working there, and one of his colleagues who was a teacher and he had all these cash, he's like, hey, can you come with me to the bank? I need someone to back me up because there's a lot of migrants. And my father was like, and you're asking from one. And they were like, no, but you're not a migrant. And he's like, oh, because you know me. And they were like, no, but I mean, it's different. So a migrant is an idea in a picture in our head. And if you kind of lose your roots and become so integrated that you don't follow your culture anymore, you become a good migrant or good well-integrated person. So you become basically assimilated. But for me, I think it would be beautiful if we would mutually respect and be curious and learn from different cultures as well.
I mean, I did kind of my PhD on this and how basically how ministries see good migrants. That was part of it, my study. And first and most important is work. You need to work. Second one, I think, seems to be smiling. You should also be smiling. Preferably smiling while you do your work. You need to learn the language, but nobody tells you how much. So it's not clear that is it enough that you can go to the grocery store and manage yourself that, or should you be able to speak to your doctor in like perfect Finnish or without an accent? Nobody knows. It's interesting you mentioned nature, because in the ministry things, nobody goes to the nature. Nature is for the Finnish people. And also migrants don't have families. That's very, very sad. That's also something that is mainly like reserved for the Finns.
Thank you.
Just very briefly, I'm not going to answer the actual question, but I'm going to say that I think that the government program is intentionally very disingenuous about trying to support integration, because on the one hand, it's telling things like we want to have 100,000 more people in work, and also that you need to integrate better into society as an immigrant. And on the other hand, they're making it a lot harder by basically threatening that if you're unemployed for 3 months, you're kicked out of the country. So how can you really integrate? Also, if you're doing these kind of low-paid jobs, which immigrants are doing in a higher proportion, you don't have the energy to be involved in civil society outside of your work. So immigrants end up becoming disenfranchised and not active parts of the community. So they're segregated simply even just by their low wage often.
Thank you. Let's take one more question from the audience here before we move on to the next stage of the program, which is thinking about the ways to move forward. So one of the most popular questions, or it's more a comment than a question, but it actually touches on the question of language that Elina was already referring to. So the comment says, or if just the person who said,
yeah, Martin Aircressin. So the language question has come up a lot of time in the past 25 years I've been here. The usual idea is that once you've learned the language, you're probably good. But then you look at kids who were born here or did their school here in Finnish or Swedish, more seldom in Sami. And no, someone with a Muslim or Slavic name is not good. Someone with a dark face is not good. There's always something wrong or inappropriate or not good enough. So I fully support the idea of learning languages. It makes basic common sense to at least speak the language of the majority, but I think the focus on language is excessive, and it basically shifts the question to a complete non-issue that is perfectly demonstrated at what happens to people who are born here who just are ethnic minorities.
Or just share a comment.
I mean, to be quite blunt, I think the language question is a euphemism for racism. It's not, native people understand that it's not okay to say that you're black, I don't hire you, or that you wear a headscarf, I won't hire you, but saying that you don't speak good enough Finnish is still acceptable.
Maybe just a short comment following that, I've always found it very curious that the language barrier becomes the kind of the main bottleneck in kind of getting into workplaces, for example, because through work you actually start learning the language. So what is the hand in the egg problem here, you know, shouldn't be a bottleneck.
I think me and quite many of the sort of researchers in the field have felt that when the generation that is being born into the immigrant families in Finland are raised in this country and sort of become working age and so on, I think it's the sort of moment of truth to the integration policy in many ways, because when these young people have been, let's say, within the Finnish system from the time they were, you know, fetuses at the maternal clinic, then you're sort of, there's very little excuses left for sort of the outcomes of the education system, for the differences in employment rates and all the different sort of aspects of integration policy. And just before Christmas, the special researcher Bhatia, working for the city of Helsinki, released a paper where one of the things he was doing, he was looking at the 20 to 29-year-olds who were born in Finland to families of immigrant parents. For the first time, we have, you know, the sort of number of these people that where you can actually do like proper quantitative research on how it went, and it's not very encouraging, I have to say. In many ways, it seems that we have not done enough, and also we haven't, as a not only, I'm not talking only about the sort of official services and measures, legislation and stuff, but also the way we operate as a civil society is not inclusive enough in many ways. And for example, one of the outcomes was that that out of these 20 to 29-year-old people who were born in this country, the native Somali speakers, the men especially, more than half of them in the capital region were lacking a degree, and I found the outcome quite shocking. It's totally not acceptable to have these sort of numbers, and it's a very bleak outlook if you think about the sort of professional and future of these people and the economic sustainability of their lives and their role as are they like, or to which extent are these people sort of fully active members of for our society? Do they have means to sort of lead sorry, it's been a long week, I'm lacking words. So do they have like opportunities to sort of fulfill their potential, let's say, in Finland, with that sort of outcome? So there is like strong grounds for criticism of the integration policy in this sense, I think.
Yes, sorry, you wanted to add a comment?
Yeah, I mean, getting back to the core of the issue, which is discrimination. You called it racism, but basically discrimination is perhaps a more neutral word. My own story is a very publicized case of someone who applied for a job at the city of Helsinki, since we were talking about Salkonen and Helsinki, who got turned out on claims that this is a job that requires fluent Finnish, and my CV very clearly say that I passed the top level of Finnish cert. How good does my Finnish need to be more? The health occupation didn't react to it. the city of Helsinki didn't react to it. Nobody reacted, nobody did anything. It's in Helsinki, it's not about. So if Helsinki wants to be the front runner of this country for immigration policy, they might have to clean up their own mess first.
Thank you for,
Definitely.
thank you for this comment. And may I just briefly comment that when we talk about the second generation of the youth or the young people who are born here, I wouldn't talk about so much about integration anymore because they were born here and they are Finns. I would talk about the deep structural issues in our society that puts many young people in the sort of the class of a second-class citizen. So I think there are very deep issues here at stake. But there was one more question there online that got a lot of votes. And this is when this new proposal will come in effect next year. So we already discussed that it's in the preparatory stages, but do we know something about the schedule at which things are happening?
Well, I don't have any insight on the actual schedule, but I do know that the ministry is working their own pace. The ministers who have the ministries under them, they kind of decide in which order they want to do stuff. So I would follow those ministries and in which order they're gonna put things down forward to the parliament. Then obviously legislation always takes a long time. Even the easiest legislations usually take a year, if not more. And then regarding especially the immigration side, as I mentioned, many of those things are stuff that they're going to research, they're going to look into. And then after that report, then we're going to the question, is there going to be legislation? Is there not going to be legislation? So it's a long process. Obviously, I don't know the schedule, but personally, I would guess that we're looking at the changes, if any changes, like to the latter side of this government period, if this government lasts that long.
I mean, in the program, they have prioritized the changes related to asylum and like changing that system. And the schedule they're giving is spring 2024. It would maybe mean that the other ones would come later, but of course they will come stage by stage, like Julia said. But it looks like the asylum is the most important, most prioritized for the government.
So as I said earlier, I think that this is pure speculation, by the way, but I think the anti-worker and anti-trade union laws are the absolute priority, and they'll try and get those through as quickly as possible. And after that, work on the anti-immigration laws. But as it's not a given, but this government might not last that long. I think the point I'd like to make is that everybody should be as active as they can at all kind of levels of society to make them fall earlier. And that means things like joining a trade union so that they are better resourced, so that they can prevent these anti-worker laws going through. Joining a political party, becoming active in a political party or other kind of NGOs or any kind of association. And if you don't know about trade unions or how else you could get involved in civil society, just message one of us and we'll try and help you.
Also, maybe point out that another thing is to obviously contact your political representative directly and ask how things are going, in what direction, and ask them questions. And also when you get active in a party, you can also ask those people questions and like clarify why we're doing this. And they actually have to answer and maybe think about like, what are the best things for this government and what are not. Because as I stated, the government policy program is not a law. It's a guideline that can be changed. And I do hope that like, especially the immigration part, that they realize the actual things that are going to change in this society and how those negative effects are going to be huge. So even if I'm obviously skeptical about how long this government will last, I do like see that there are some good things that I hope that they will pass before we get to like a stage that I hope that they kind of stop at. But I mean, make noise about the things that you don't like and ask why are they doing these things, like keep politicians accountable. I mean, it's their job to answer you and to explain why they're doing their things.
May I just really briefly add one thing?
Very briefly.
Yeah, so one concern is that they went in really hard with very strong discriminatory laws, because knowing that they won't be able to pass them and then trying to get through a watered down version. But let's not settle down, let's not settle for that watered down version either, because it still won't be in anyone's benefit.
I think these responses are a great way to move on to the last stage of our program, which is thinking about the ways to move forward. We also have a little bit more than 10 minutes left, so this is a really important part of the program, so we will move on to that now. So the question, first we will ask this from the panelists, and I hope that you will be brief, because we will want to hear from the audience as well. But basically, how can we as a civil society have a say in all this? How can we impact these changes that are being proposed? Who would like to start?
Okay. Yeah, I think great things were mentioned here, and politicians, they really do listen to voters. They feel the pressure. Not only your favorite politicians, but also the ones that you maybe not agree with, like send them emails and go see them somewhere, especially representatives from your party. So the Swedish, how is it in English? I don't remember.
The Swedish People's Party.
The Swedish People's Party is the coalition party. These parties still have representatives who are worried about these policies. So a little bit of pressure in that way, I think, is a way forward. Also, trade unions are very important. Local sections in political parties, if you find that interesting for yourself, but also in general, just talk to people and see people and get active. Go to demonstrations, not only to show the power, but feel empowered as well as a citizen, and that you have agency in this society.
Well, I feel like I already mentioned quite a lot there, I think, but like mainly be active and look at like legislation will slide past you, because like, I mean, in politics a lot happens, so it's easy to miss also stuff. So, you know, follow what happens and keep your politicians accountable.
If I might add something, I think really important is to have this conversation even with your Finnish friends, like native Finnish, not to show them your story, because they hear the politician story, they hear the conventional stories, but they don't hear your story. So speak with them, tell your stories.
And if I may, we have Shreyas who wanted to comment on how expats and immigrants can move this forward. Are you here? Can I give you the mic, and please keep your comments short, but so we can get other people's opinions as well. So this is now the open mic session of the evening.
Hi guys, I'm Shreyas. Apparently I'm a very famous person, and with that great influence comes great responsibility. So at least for me, I want to comment on how immigrants and expats can contribute to moving the needle forward. And I think like this is sort of like a short comment on when the original panel list was announced for this event. There was some criticisms that, hey, there were like white ass Finnish names. Where is the diversity? I think while these might seem valid criticisms, I agree that we need more immigrant representation in all foundations and organization boards. But I think it's an double-edged sword as well. On the one hand, like most lobbying organizations, political or nonprofit, that lobby for immigrant rights are, you know, like inherently like conservative, showing like Finnish, like white people. But also we do have to agree that the level of activism from immigrants was far less before this whole government program was announced. So I think we should do our part in this, in the sense that I'm going to give you a short example. I was part of this Revive well-being project at Aalto University. There were 15 Finns and 2 non-Finns. And I was so glad when I became the vice president, not because, hey, I'm gonna boss people around, but we have like a POV of like a immigrant perspective on this well-being. So I just want to say that be active in joining those initiatives and causes that you believe in, so that the POV of immigrants go into those boards. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I can bring it back to the panel, or if anybody else wants to mic, we can offer it to you. Sorry. On that side? Yes.
So maybe I'll pass it down to Martin. This is.
Yeah, I just shortly want to comment to what is his name, Ramchandra, that yeah, if you are completely discriminated based on like we are thrown out completely based on the language base. It's completely impossible to participate in any social circles. Basically, like Helsinki left have been the English speaking left have been the only English speaking thing that politically have been encouraging people basically. So this has been the first initiative. There are no such initiative at all. So like the people, and what Nick mentioned before as well, that the jobs that you do, it just doesn't give you any time to be socially active. So that's one thing. I just want to say one more thing, and I don't want to sound radical here, but the main thing here is like I came here as a asylum seeker myself 7 years ago. I've been working with, throughout the week, I work with at least 12, 13 groups, completely immigrants and all that. One thing I have to say, like we talk a lot about immigrants working and non-working and all that. Ask every single one of you in this room, ask yourself, how many immigrants do you know who don't want to work? Not a single one. I don't know, I know thousands, and I don't know a single one who don't want to work. I know many Finns who don't want to work. I don't know any immigrant. That's one thing. And the last comment, sorry about it, is like you are people of power. And when you say these things, do you say these things to your people in your political parties as well or no? Because this is the thing, we all know that throughout these policies, I just want to be a little bit hypothetical here, that we know that these policies are not going to work. Immigration is not going to start. If a kid in Africa is starving to death, they would not care about Orpo's policy if they should cross or not. They will cross. So that's another thing. So this will not work. Brexit has not worked. Trump's wall has not worked. This would not work as well. Why don't we call it by its name? It is the same thing, segregation. Segregate people and make them their enemies, and that's what the Finns true Finns are doing at least. So call it by its name. It's fascism. It's the mid stage of the fascism basically. So if we give this government the legitimacy just because it's elected, so was Hitler.
Very impactful response. If I may shift us back to just action agenda, what can we do together as civil society? Who would like to do that? Shall I give it to you?
Yes, very short list. One thing we should do, I've done research on this on myself, is that this kind of restrictive asylum policies don't work because asylum seekers here don't even know they will become asylum seekers, because in their countries, there is no asylum seekers. Refugees are integrated in other ways. So whatever restrictive policy there is, it will not work. And I think we should find ways to communicate this everywhere for politicians, that this kind of policy making just is nonsense.
Hannah, is somebody there who would like to ask? And please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sam. So I've been involved in a little bit of this in this space recently. But one thing I just wanted to say about the point of action is that day-to-day of politics is actually really, really boring. And the reason why I say that is that, as these things go through from, this government program to then they have to draft the legislation, and then, there are many stages that things have to go through. And there are many points at which things may sort of take public feedback, right? And so there'll be many opportunities for people, I think, to actually write to either the representatives of the various parties, or there may even be opportunities to solicit feedback either from the public directly, or through organizations which might be making submissions to these various parliamentary committees as they're doing their work. And they do actually take that into consideration in terms of sort of how they want to sort of procedurally do things. Do they bundle certain things together? Do they not? Do they ask for more opinions? Do things take more time? Just to give an example of how this can work, they tried to do something similar in the country where I'm from, which is Australia, specifically on the citizenship, lengthening of residence time. And they put that out to public comment through the committee, and they got 6,000 submissions from various organizations and private individuals. And the sort of pressure that actually created within the parliament and the procedural roadblocks that created meant that it got stuck in the committee, and well, it sort of went to its grave there, and hasn't really been considered since. So this can actually have an impact. And this is, I think, something that people should pay attention to when these submissions actually open, and certainly something that I'll be drawing attention to when the opportunity for that comes.
Thank you, Sam. I don't see any other pressing hands, because I do want to give the mic back to the panel to also respond. And was there one more? Somebody who really wants to? Yes, please go ahead. We can try to give everyone a chance.
Hi, I'll be very quick. I just wanted to say that one other thing that could be done, there's been talk about putting pressure on public representatives, politicians, but I think another thing that you can do, depending on who you are and where you work, is put pressure on your workplace. I know several private organizations, private companies want to take a stand, and I know that these organizations are likely to take a cautious and conservative stand. So the more pressure you put on them to take a stronger, bolder stand, the more pressure we put on them to do that, the more we can move the needle of that conversation.
One more short comment here.
So about what can be done, which is what was the main question. So at the parliamentary level, I'm afraid that not much can be done. And it's not just a question of having a rightist coalition. It's also a matter of parliamentary politics having a much tighter level of convergence than municipal politics does. So yes, we do need to put pressure on the parliament and to at least cut half of their ideas, or better yet, make that coalition fall, knock on wood. But where we can move a lot is at the municipal level. That's where the integration services are nowadays. That's where the community is, that's where the law. And we see a perfect example of that with Teemu's team, Olga, Melissa, Betsy. The competence center in Espoo really is bubbling. It's attracting a lot of buzz. In some municipalities like Espoo, it works well. In Helsinki, it doesn't work at all. Helsinki focuses on the VIPs for 90-day Finns program.
Okay. I want to pass the mic to the panelists just to take through with us what are your final thoughts on ways forward. So start with Teemu, and then I'll just go around. Yeah.
Well, the question was how could we do stuff as actors of the civil society? I'm a bureaucrat, so it's in my work I have slightly different kind of perspective. But I think many very sort of wise words have been already said on how to influence things. But also, I mean, it was mentioned in many comments before, like this notion of ordering workers but getting people instead, and that sort of perspective is very important in my opinion, and perhaps I would like to encourage all of us, including me, to be sort of to sort of interact with people from different backgrounds. And there was quite a lot of talk about changing the way people think. Based on my experience, I feel that often if you do things together with diverse group of people, it tends to change your thinking, and not vice versa. I don't really strongly believe in sort of changing thinking and then that leading to more interaction with diverse people. I feel it's the other way around oftentimes. So if we're doing stuff together with mixed bunch of people, it tends to change our thinking. And I believe that among native Finns, we do need quite a bit of that. We need to have a more open concept of what it means to be a Finn, what it means to be a member of this society, what it means to be a resident here. And if we can't open those concepts as a nation, then we only sort of end up excluding people.
Yeah, I think great many things have been said, and maybe just to summarize it is that events like this and the gatherings of people, I've already learned a lot today. I mean, you mentioned about the private sector, you mentioned about the NGOs and the organizations and government bodies, you mentioned about the city level, someone mentioned the state level. So this way we can compile the information and see all the target points, the points of intervention and the context and the context that we need. And I know that as there are a lot of people who are very worried what's going to happen in Finland, even those who these policies don't necessarily yet concern. But they want to help, but they might not know, they don't understand the system, they don't know how to help, what will these changes actually mean. So maybe to keep up such events, create knowledge, gather strategies and invite policymakers as well, and to actually show that, hey, you can do this at the municipality level, invite the people from the parties if you wish, and just together, because it's a very depressing time, it's a very worrying time for many, but sometimes action, helps you to create these communities that you need, and something nice can come out of this eventually. So I would just say that, I don't know if you have more capacity and budget for such things, or anyone. I mean, this is always a thing that kuka tekes, and so who does it eventually? So that would be my only thing way forward, and please invite me and my colleagues from the Green Party. We're happy to help.
Well, I think Riina kind of summarized it pretty well, but also kind of remember that like everyone here also sitting has a job to do, and remember to kind of bring it up also in those places that we're sitting at. Because as stated, we all kind of have a place of power of some sort, and it's important to also kind of remember to use it.
Earlier already I mentioned friends and how friends are most likely you get more impact from them. And I'm pretty sure that you all have friends. So maybe starting from there, finding something you can do. It doesn't have people are very different. There are very different ways to do things. Some people may want to go to write to the parliamentarians, but if that's not your thing, you don't have to do that. You can start from your friends. Just find whatever it is that you want to do that works for you, because all the things that we do are valuable. The only thing that does not work is not doing anything.
Yep, so I agree with all of these points. Try and influence things in your workplace, through your trade union, support an NGO, influence politicians directly, become a member of a political party. You can be as active or as passive as you are capable of. If you're an overexploited worker who has no energy after work, just be a passive supporter. Talk to your friends about it, spread the word through whatever networks. If you have the energy, be more active. contact people, welcome to contact us. And we'll try and help you with advice or try and help you get involved.
Yes, and I wanted to add something personally that we know the system is not perfect, but the system is in there and we should use it. We should try to reach as many people as possible, as many decision makers, as many people on power. A lot of things have to be fixed. We shouldn't allow them to get worse, that this program is like trying to make it worse. And you know, it is okay to be angry. It's okay to be angry, get angry, but use that anger. Personally, I do that. Use that anger to try to change things for better. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I think it's time to start to close this event. I think we all organizers are just really extremely grateful for all of you for being here. This has been a really great discussion. Thank you all panelists, speakers. This was really, really great. We really appreciate your input and all of you for active participation. And myself, I can say that I see this only as the first step, that this can't stop here. We have to do something, and whatever each of us can do in our everyday surroundings, we should do it, whether it's the workplace, the friendships, the organizations that we affiliate with. But we will also continue discussing, as organizers, what we can do next.
So with that in mind, there's been many, many people behind this event. It took us about 2 or 3 weeks to pull this together. There's Irena, there's Sanna, there's Utish, Ruta, Gorika, many of my students who were helping out with this. I just Bhuvna, who did all the design work for this. This is action in the making. I mean, pulling something off like this is important for us to do, and we should do many more. Hopefully not just me and Johanna and Dietmar, but all of you thinking about organizing workshops, events, meetings with parliamentarians, whatever you want to do, that would be amazing. One thing we are going to do is try to put a summary of this discussion we've had. And Minna has been taking really good notes, and we're going to have that summary up online. And we had some trouble with the live stream, so we started with YouTube and then we went to Zoom. So we might have some choppy bits of video from this that we can put online for fun. So you can refer back to people on that. But if you have any commentary about this event and you want to write about it, and or just in general about these issues, there are many forums you can be talking about. So let's not lose the steam here. Let's build connections with each other here. Let's work together. We have a lot of work to do. So any other quick comments, and then we'll try to end this. Yes, okay. I'm going to pass the mic around because why not? Let's just go. I'm going to go up, and whoever wants to talk, it's up. Yes.
I just want to extend the invite to people who want to keep the conversation going. The next demonstration is on 3rd September, which is a weekend. So for people who, like me, were working and had to miss today, hopefully everyone can join. And it's called Maijansali. My Finnish is that good as that, but if you Google it, you can find all the details. So hopefully see everybody on the 3rd again.
Thank you for courage. Yes.
I just wanted to know where online we can find all this stuff mentioned.
So we've been putting stuff on social media, but we do have a page on the Trust M website. If you go to the Trust M website, we have a page for this event where we will have a video, and we will have some videos and a summary. Who else wanted to say something? Because now we're just letting you guys
one more
in the back.
Yeah,
just can run up.
We have the
Yes. I didn't